How much sunlight do you really need? 5 minutes? 20? 30? You probably heard a number before, but here's the surprising part. There is no single amount of sunlight that works for everyone. The sunlight reaching your skin changes with your location, season, time of day, skin pigmentation, clothing, and UV intensity. And sunlight has a paradox at its center. It can help your body to produce vitamin D and provide important daylight signals, while too much ultraviolet exposure can damage your skin. So the real question isn't simply how many minutes of sun do I need? It's what am I actually trying to get from sunlight? When UVB radiation reaches your skin, it can trigger the production of vitamin D3. Vitamin D plays important role in calcium and phosphate regulation, bone health, and normal muscle function. So yes, sunlight can contribute to your vitamin D status. But there's a problem with popular advice. Just get 10 or 20 minutes of sun. But there is no universal vitamin D sunlight prescription. Why? Because UV exposure varies dramatically. A few minutes under strong summer sunlight in Florida isn't equivalent to the same amount of time outside on a winter morning in Ohio. And two people standing in the same sunlight can also receive different amounts of UV depending on their skin pigmentation, clothing, and how much skin is exposed. One study from India shows just how complicated this can be. In 2018, researchers studied 160 healthy men aged 40 to 60 in Pune, India. They measured vitamin D levels and also used devices called polysulfone dosimeter to measure ultraviolet exposure. The researchers found that in this specific population, greater reported midday sunlight exposure was associated with maintaining higher vitamin D levels. But this does not mean everyone needs an hour or more of sunlight every day. These were 160 men living in one particular location with specific lifestyle, clothing patterns, skin characteristics, and environmental conditions. The real reason is much more important. Sunlight requirement can vary substantially between people, and skin pigmentation is one reason why. Melanin absorbs ultraviolet radiation. Because of this, people with darker skin generally produce vitamin D less efficiently from the same amount of UVB exposure than people with lighter skin, all else being equal. But even skin color doesn't give us a magic number. Latitude, season, time of day, clothing, and UV intensity all change the equation. So the idea that everyone should follow the 20-minute rule is simply too simplistic. And there is another distinction most people miss. Morning sunlight and midday sunlight aren't biologically identical. Brighter outer light, particularly early in the day, helps providing timing signals to your brain and support your circadian system, the internal clock that helps regulate your sleep-wake cycle. But bright morning light doesn't automatically mean you are getting substantial vitamin D producing UVB. Vitamin D production requires UVB reaching your skin, and UVB is generally stronger when the sun is higher in the sky. So, morning outdoor light can be useful for your body clock, while midday conditions may be more effective for vitamin D production under some circumstances. But that doesn't mean you should stay in the midday sun longer, because the same UV that can contribute to vitamin D production can also cause damage. That's the paradox. Sunlight and daylight are associated with several aspects of health, including circadian regulation and seasonal mood patterns. Researchers are also studying possible cardiovascular and cognitive effects of light and UV exposure. But we have to be careful. An association doesn't prove that sunlight prevents dementia, heart disease, or other major illnesses. And when it comes to children, greater time outdoors is associated with a lower risk of developing myopia. Again, the important distinction is outdoor daylight is not the same thing as deliberately increasing UV exposure. Here is perhaps the most important point. If some UV exposure helps produce vitamin D, you might assume that more must be better. But vitamin D production doesn't increase indefinitely in proportion to UV exposure. At some point, additional UV doesn't provide an equivalent additional vitamin D benefit. Meanwhile, excessive UV exposure can cause sunburn, contribute to premature skin aging and DNA damage, and increase skin cancer risk. So, more sun doesn't automatically mean more health, and that's why deliberately maximizing UV exposure isn't the goal. So, how much sunlight do you really need? There isn't one universal answer. For vitamin D, requirements vary between people and environment. For your circadian rhythm, regular exposure to bright outdoor light can provide important timing signal. And for general health, spending time outdoors can be valuable without making UV exposure the objective. The goal isn't to maximize sunlight, it is to get the benefits of daylight while minimizing unnecessary UV damage. Because sunlight isn't simply good and it isn't simply bad. It is a biological exposure with benefits and limits. And sometimes the most scientifically honest answer isn't a number, it is understanding why there isn't one.